you. Thanks. Make sure this is on. Mark, thank you for the warm introduction, and thanks for providing this opportunity to Jeff and myself as well. I know we're very excited about this. So as Mark had mentioned, we're part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, so we're a federal government agency, and specifically I'm with the U.S. Commercial Service Office here in Silicon Valley. So a little bit about this, and Mark touched upon this as well. You know, why export? So much of the business opportunity is overseas. Now we've got the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We have discussions with the European Union. We've got a number of free trade agreements throughout the world. And so US companies with great technologies, particularly those here in the Bay Area, are well positioned to do business in overseas markets. And then ultimately, when it comes down to it, we're really an economic development organization as well, because we realize that when US companies export, they can hire more staff, it increases their productivity. So it's really all about US business growth. So Mark had mentioned, you know, we've got our Silicon Valley office here. We also have about 99 offices throughout the country. So I work in the Silicon Valley office. We've also got an office in Oakland for companies in the East Bay. We've got an office in San Francisco, one in Sacramento, one in Marin. And then I've highlighted some of these as well. So St. Louis, we've got an office in Fargo, we've got one in Hawaii, Alaska, Seattle, you know, etc. So we work with our local cities and our local communities and local businesses to help them find business partners overseas and to make connections to overseas buyers. So a little bit about our Silicon Valley office. We're kind of your first stop shop for international business development. You can come to us, you know, we'll have a 1 hour or, you know, 30-minute consultation with a company to discuss a little bit more about the product, you know, what your objectives are overseas, trade counseling, market intelligence, business matchmaking, things to that effect. So, you know, oftentimes it starts with a phone call or a meeting. We learn a little bit about the company and then develop a strategy to help the company export to overseas markets. I should caveat that I'd say the most successful companies are those that have a product or a service that has been well developed here in the United States. Okay, so sometimes we get calls from companies that want to start a business or they have an idea. So that's probably best directed to maybe SCORE or some other organizations, and we're glad to provide those resources as well. But a lot of times when a company has a great product, they're doing a lot of great business here in the US and just want to explore other markets, those are great companies for us to work with. And all of this is free I should highlight too. So all these counseling sessions and business arrangements here, this is free. So we talked a little bit about our domestic network. Now I'd like to highlight a little bit about our international network. So overseas, we're represented at the commercial section of all the US embassies and consulates worldwide. So if you have an embassy or a consulate overseas, you've got the commercial section run by the Department of Commerce, you've got the State Department, you've got the FBI, you've got the USDA, all of that. So we are the commercial section of all the embassies and consulates overseas. So in all of these countries, really, we've got a presence. And our staff are cover about 5 or 6 different sectors. So we're generalists in a number of different topics. So for example, my sectors are clean technology, consumer products, financial services, professional services, e-commerce. Some of my other colleagues cover education or health and life sciences. Some other colleagues cover general telecommunications. So each cover a number of different sectors. And likewise, our counterparts overseas also cover a number of different sectors too. So they are our boots on the ground, so to speak, when we help a company look into market opportunities in an overseas country. There's the diplomatic staff, and they move around every 2 or 3 years, and they serve as managers. But the people in these countries are local natives there. They're employed by the US government. So they know the language, they know the government officials, they know the business contacts, and they're a great resource for business development in their respective country. So I just highlighted a few lists here of some of the kinds of questions that we get. In fact, one of these I just got yesterday. So it was this one: can I export to Cuba, Syria, Sudan, or Somalia? I got a call from a Silicon Valley company that was pinged by a potential partner in Somalia and wanted to know if he could do business there. So we provided him with some insight on that, working with the Bureau of Industry and Security. Intellectual property is a very big topic for a lot of companies. How do you protect intellectual property when you go overseas? And we're very fortunate to have the new PTO office here, so we work really closely with them. Testing and certification is a big issue. With our office at the US mission to the EU in Brussels, they do a lot for testing and certification for EU requirements. So that comes up quite a bit. Sometimes, my buyer never paid me, or my product got stuck in port. How do I get it out? We get those questions as well. I know a while back there was one company that had their product stuck in Ukraine and couldn't get it out of customs or get it out of port. So the US Embassy in Kiev was able to make some phone calls and fix that issue. So this is just kind of an example of the various questions that we get. So I want to take a little bit of time to highlight a little bit about the exact services and programs. So how do we get companies to find buyers overseas, or what's the mechanisms to do that? And ultimately, when it comes down to it, we'll talk to a company, learn a little bit more about what their objectives are, and then tailor a specific program for them. But we do have some programs here that help companies find partners overseas. So one is the Gold Key service. It's a B2B matching program. And basically, a company will kind of give an objective of what their ideal buyer or partner would be in a particular country. Our colleagues at the embassy will then develop a vetted, pre-screened list of potential partners for the US company to meet with. We'll arrange some conference calls and go through the list, and then the company will say, oh, I want to meet with, numbers 1 through 5 on this list. So our colleagues at the embassy will then arrange for a customized day or two of meetings for the US company. The US company flies over, say, I had an example recently, Manila. And then the embassy staff is there on hand to help with the translation, to help with the hotels, to help with the logistics, and might sit in on the meetings too, between the US company and the potential partner. We have support before, during, after this whole process. So there's a series of conference calls and email exchanges to make sure that everything moves smoothly for the US company when they arrive in the country and have their meetings. The cost for this is about $700, and it could be a day or two of meetings. So that's just one program. Another one that I see a lot of is the background check on a potential partner overseas. So this being Silicon Valley, you get a lot of companies here that are looking for potential investors from overseas, and they get inquiries but don't know anything about this company in Asia or the Middle East, and they want a little bit more background information. So our colleagues at the embassy can go and make just a courtesy meeting to that company, learn a little bit about them, see what their offices are like. And then they'll use Dun & Bradstreet reports or press releases or any information they can find about the company, and provide the US company with a background check report on that potential partner overseas. So I've seen these a lot, and they're a great resource. What I usually do as a first step is to ask the embassy overseas to see if they actually know the company already, which sometimes is the case. That company overseas might be a member of the American Chamber of Commerce, or they might be very familiar to the embassy. But it's always nice when we can provide that information to the company here. And this is about $600 per company. The final one I'm going to highlight is our single company promotion or product launch event. I'm actually working on one of these for Sweden right now. There's a Silicon Valley company that wants to do a big splash event in Stockholm in April. And so they're going to do a networking reception evening event at the ambassador's residence in Stockholm. And then the following day, we're coordinating a workshop for them with their partners in Sweden, developing the invitation list, The invitations will go out on U.S. Embassy letterhead with the U.S. company logo. And we do all the work as far as getting the invitations out, taking the RSVPs, helping with food, beverage, that sort of thing. Sometimes it's a formal dinner, sometimes it's more of a seminar, whatever really needs to be done, or whatever the company's objective is. And the cost of this varies. It's basically, food and beverage. Some other things that we do are advocacy for projects, and this is really for, say, the GEs and the Boeings and port development and big infrastructure projects. But at the Commerce headquarters, we do have the advocacy office, and they work through the interagency process to make sure that U.S. national interests are represented in big public tender, public bidding processes. So this is a great resource for U.S. companies that might be putting in for a tender and want a little bit of U.S. government support there. And then I've highlighted just a few resources as well. And these are all organizations that we work very, very closely with. And in fact, a lot of them have a representation here in the Bay Area. So I mentioned the PTO office that just opened. Bureau of Industry and Security is also part of the Commerce Department. They have an office in San Jose, and they deal more with ECCN numbers and export control licenses. So they're a great resource. SBA, you'll be hearing from Jeff very soon. And then also Export-Import Bank, and we're very excited that they're got reauthorized and everything's moving forward. Export-Import Bank also has an office in San Francisco and is a great resource for finance as well. U.S. Trade and Development Agency is a sister government agency that has a lot of programs similar to us, but they focus more on the developing world. So they'll do projects in Africa or Southeast Asia. They won't be in Europe or they won't be in Canada. It's primarily focused on developing. And then the Overseas Private Investment Corporation is another resource as well. So I've highlighted here just a few of our successes that we've had from some companies. We had a great success with Space Systems Loral and Export-Import Bank in Bulgaria a while back. Johnny Rockets has used us a lot for expanding their franchises into overseas markets. Sylvan Source is a Bay Area company as well, and they've used our services. Now I just want to take a few minutes to highlight, I see some smiles back there, so this might be very familiar, but the Hannover Messe program is a Department of Commerce and a U.S. government priority right now. So the conference is taking place in April 2016. It's the first time in 45 years, 50 years, that the U.S. has been featured as the host country. Secretary Pritzker is confirmed to attend. There's an invitation pending to President Obama. So it's a really big deal for a lot of government organizations. So there's 7 pavilion areas at the conference. One is focused on energy. We have advanced transportation, industrial automation, digital factory. But it's all innovations to help the manufacturing process. The conference attracts about 200,000 people from throughout the world. 70% I think are outside of Europe.
30%.
So 30%? Okay. And 70% are in Europe.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for the clarification.
I was there the day before yesterday.
Oh, for the PTO.
Yes.
Yeah, oh, wonderful. We just did a big event at PTO a couple days ago about this too. And we have Hannover Messe representatives doing a roadshow all this week in the Bay Area to support it. Thank you, that's good. So we have a series of pavilions at the program. We have a U.S. industry area for all of the pavilions, and then all of the U.S. companies, regardless of where they're at, will be able to take part in some of our commercial service programs at the event. So we'll be doing business-to-business matchmaking there. We're bringing about 25 of our foreign commercial service specialists from throughout the world to the conference to meet with U.S. companies to do one-on-one meetings to discuss business opportunities in their respective countries. So I know China's on the list, India, there's a couple down in Latin America too. And then this is,
where's that, Hannover?
yeah, Hanover is in Germany. So it's a big conference.
Germany,
Yeah.
That's where it always is?
It is, and this was kind of news to me recently. The first conference was back in like 1947 or 48 as a way to reinvigorate the German economy. And so it's been going on since the 1940s. And over the past 6 or 7 years, they've had this kind of partner country status. Prime Minister Modi attended last year when India was the partner country. I think they've had, other heads of state. So that being a sign, we're really hoping that the president of the U.S. will be at the event. And in fact, there was
Modi
just
was there 2 years ago.
right,
That's
yeah,
what he said.
yeah. So it's a big deal. They just are starting interagency discussions at the White House in Washington D.C. as of last week. So Department of Energy is on board, Department of Transportation. So there's a lot of discussion on it.
So Shannon, is there only one country that has partner country status?
For this year,
For
correct?
this year?
Yeah.
Each
so
year it's one country.
right, yeah. So
And
last year was
they
India.
have more involvement in putting it on or something? Is that the
Right, yeah. So we at the Commerce Department are charged with getting and encouraging U.S. companies to attend the program. So that's, and then our value-added services too. Raising the Made in USA, Go in USA flag, basically. Yeah. So I know there's a lot of words on here, but just wanted to highlight some of our value-added services, and I mentioned these a little bit. So we have about 25 of our overseas foreign commercial service staff that will be there for counseling. We're doing B2B programs. The first night is the opening reception. It's when Angie Merkel and hopefully President Obama will be there to kind of kick it off. It's very splashy, so the U.S. companies will get some reception tickets to that. We're doing scheduled booth tours. We have monthly Know Before You Go webinars. The next one will be December 16th. And I put a flyer out in the back on the Hannover program, and that's got the webinar schedule on it as well. A lot of press spotlights at the event, and then a little bit about the U.S. pavilions, turnkey booth options. So it's kind of a packaged turnkey booth for U.S. companies that want to be in that U.S. pavilion area. The other opportunity is to have kind of your own pavilion area that you can design and format to your liking. But the past numerous weeks, I've been a lot of 6 a.m., 7 a.m. calls with U.S. companies, our German counterparts, Hannover, to explain the program. So I know the booths are filling up quickly, and I think the end of December is when they're aiming to have everything finalized there. And then also I note here state and trade associations. So part of the conference is the investment pavilion. So I know like the state of Washington, the state of Ohio, a lot of economic development organizations are going to be in this area to support U.S. investment into the United States. So there's more information on the flyer. I can chat about it later as well. So with that, I'll conclude. My contact information is here, and I'd be glad to chat afterwards or take questions now or maybe after Jeff speaks too. Great, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again very much for being here. Thank you, Shannon. I mean, one of the great things that that the federal government offers is the Department of Commerce and their services to really help companies understand what the international market opportunity is for them. Their website, export.gov, is the encyclopedia, the go-to resource for anything about exporting. In the handout I've given you, you'll see a couple of things in there. One is one with a little yellow banner across the top. That can be a great tool for you, sometimes decoding what are all these agencies, who are all these people, what do they actually do. That's got some good links for you to use. The second one with a sort of a purplish banner shows all of the SBA, Small Business Administration programs, and that's another program, or that explains what I'll be talking about today. I am again with U.S. Small Business Administration, part of the federal government. I'm based in San Francisco. Jeff Deese is my name, and my market territory is all of Northern California. So I want to help all of you get the financing you need as you get into export markets. So we're going to spend the balance of the time here plumbing the mysteries of export finance, probably one of the most intriguing mysteries that I can think of. So we'll see how this goes. Well, we'll see how this goes.
Down?
Oh, well, down. There we go. That's how it goes. All right. So exporting and financing is very much a combination of the export company, you, the exporter, and your lender. You need to have a financial institution that's going to be helping you. Financial institutions are very interested in helping you, but they're also very interested in making sure it's done in a very safe way. And they can be very reluctant when it comes to getting into international markets because of the added risks and complexities associated with international business. So Small Business Administration is one of the federal government agencies really charged with what can we do to facilitate this relationship and really make finance flow for U.S. companies that are involved in exporting. And there are actually two government agencies that are charged with doing this, and we have two tools for helping that relationship work. A Small Business Administration that I've mentioned, and then the other agency that we've heard about is the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Now it sounds like a bank, but it's actually a federal government agency. A little confusing name, but we call it XM Bank for short. And they who's heard of XM Bank? They've been in the news recently. Unfortunately, they ran into a little bit of a hiccup. They need to be reauthorized periodically by Congress, and there were some challenges in getting them reauthorized. They went offline on June 30th and were inactive throughout the summer into the fall. And as of Monday, they are up and running again, fully functional, reauthorized for 4 years. So we have that second key partner fully active and available to help us. And they provide a particular tool that is, in my opinion, the number one tool you need to know about if you're doing any export. And that's something called export credit insurance. What's one of the biggest things you're worried about after you've used commerce to find these international buyers? You're selling internationally. You've got some added concerns about, am I going to get paid? And if I'm not going to get paid, how in the heck am I going to go? I'm not going to go overseas and hire a foreign lawyer and go into a foreign court system. This is very complicated. Wouldn't there be a better, safer way to do business internationally? Thanks to XM Bank and private sector insurers provide this as well. There's something called export credit insurance. And I'll talk about that in a minute. That gives you protection as you're selling internationally. So that's the first tool. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The second tool is export loan guarantees. This is something that can help the banks make loans to businesses that they otherwise might not be willing to do. And two federal government agencies offer these loan guarantees to banks to get the financing to you, the exporter. Small Business Administration, my agency, and again, XM Bank has programs that do this too. So those two programs and those two agencies are the key players here. Let me talk specifically about Small Business Administration, my agency. And again, the sheet with the little purple band explains what these programs are in more detail, but three programs: International Trade Loan, Export Working Capital Program, Export Express, support lending to small businesses up to $5 million for getting export financing in place for their company. The thing that's really cool about these export programs is they provide enhanced loan guarantees. Small Business Administration, who's heard of SBA here? Anybody? Good, oh good, look at all this, this is great. You hear about us frequently whenever issues come up about access to credit. Are businesses able to get the financing they need? There's a shortage of credit. What do we do to do about that? SBA is one of the key agencies that's supposed to help make that happen. And we do that by providing these loan guarantees. For companies that are just domestic companies selling within the U.S., we provide 50 to 75% guarantees to banks, to kind of give them a little incentive, to make them feel safe and do some more lending. But if the company is an exporter, we have these programs which provide 90% guarantees to the bank. So added incentive to make that loan, get the credit flowing to those businesses that are really the key to the future of this economy, those people that are selling into the international markets as well as domestically. Okay, so the first mystery for you, the first thing on your mind is, what the heck is a small business? Okay, that is a great question, and it can be complicated, but it can also be very simple. There's the traditional way that SBA has defined what a small business is. And that's where we look at what type of business category are you in? What's your NAICS code? Every business is placed in some kind of category, sub category of manufacturer or retail, wholesale, whatever. Typically, as a general rule of thumb, if you're a manufacturer and you have 500 or less employees, you're a small business. If you're a wholesaler, 100 employees or less, you're a small business. If you're a retailer, there's a whole spectrum depending on what it is you're selling. It can be, anywhere in this range. If you're a farmer, you can't be making more than $750,000 of revenue per year. And that's looking at not just your company, but any affiliates you may have as well. So if you're owned by a larger company, we look at that as well. And that's a rule of thumb I'm giving you right there. So it's complicated definition, right? And the only way I can tell you for sure is you've got to call me up and look it up, and wow, it's complex. But there's something else that we have, which we call the alternate size standard, which is very, maybe a little complicated, but pretty darn straightforward because it applies to every business. So regardless of whether you meet definition number 1, if you meet definition number 2, you're a small business. So if you and any of your affiliate companies have a tangible net worth of less than $15 million, and if for the last 2 years, your net income, I'm not talking about your revenue, I'm talking about after all expenses are deducted, you have not made more than $5 million per year on average for the last 2 years, you're a small business. Okay, so I think based on definition number 2, you're probably in pretty good shape in most cases. And then if you're not there, then we can really worry about going to that sort of standard old-fashioned definition that's more complicated. So bottom line here is lots of opportunity for businesses to take advantage of SBA programs. Okay, so let's now delve into some real export mysteries. That was the small business mystery, but these are the real mysteries that you face when you're getting into those international markets. This one I call the 95% solution. All right, so when I talk to US companies, frequently what I hear them say is, Jeff, I have a very simple policy in selling to international buyers. I tell them, pay me cash in advance. I never have any problems. And that's a brilliant solution. If you can get your foreign buyers to pay you cash in advance, and they're happy to do that, you have no reason to do anything else. Why would you want to take any more risk? But I think by and large when you get, and that's a great way to get acquainted as well. When you're first talking to these international buyers, you don't know them, they don't know you. You need to get to a point where you can get comfortable. So that's a great approach. But as you get into these markets, you'll find selling on open account terms where you're allowing the foreign buyer to pay you in 30, 60, maybe even 90, or maybe even a little longer in some cases. That's what you need to do to be competitive, because all of your international competitors are doing this. And your foreign buyer is saying, I love your product, but there's another one that's basically almost as good, and they'll give me open account terms. The interest rate in my country is very high. I've got to borrow this money to pay you and still wait for the goods. This is not working for me. If you can give me terms, I'll buy more than I've ever bought before from you. That's an attractive offer, but you're thinking, what could happen in the country? What if there's a war? What if there's hyperinflation? There's a whole government complex. They could freeze their currency. God knows what's going to happen in the international world these days. Furthermore, really, what do you really know about this company? You know something, but you are worried that if they don't pay you, again, you're not going to go over there and hire a foreign lawyer or fight them in the foreign courts to get paid. How do you deal with that risk of non-payment? Export credit insurance is an ideal answer. There's lots of ways to structure international sales, but this is perhaps the easiest one to use. You can use things like letters of credit. Maybe you've heard of that. But this is an alternative that you can use in lieu of that, something called export credit insurance. And again, Export-Import Bank offers this federal government agency. They have a bunch of different insurance policies. And basically what it is you have an open account sale with a foreign buyer. If you perform and that foreign buyer does not pay you, either due to something that happened in the country or there was a war or international circumstances don't allow that willing buyer to pay you, or if that willing buyer turns out to not be acting in good faith, and they file bankruptcy, they won't pay you, you have an insurance policy against non-payment of your foreign account receivable. XM Bank offers 95% protection. So you sell for a $100,000 product, deliver $100,000 of goods, they file bankruptcy, something bad happens, you can file an insurance claim and collect 95 cents on the dollar, $95,000. And you just collect from XM Bank instead. And get this, it is cheap. It is very inexpensive. For 60-day terms, 65 cents per $100 is the cost. So about 0.5%. And you can build that into the price of your product. You can say to the foreign buyer, well, if you need open account terms, yes, I can do that, but there's a financing charge. Add that on to the price. It doesn't cost you anything. It costs nothing to get this policy, and once you have it in place, you use it you pay when you use it. So it's like a fantastic tool to have in your back pocket. Get signed up and draw on it when you have need. It's also very cool because it's not just a license to export to anyone. It's a license to export with insurance for those buyers that XM Bank agrees to insure. So you have this foreign buyer that you're interested in. You're saying, okay, I'm going to take a little risk here. I'm going to go 60 days with this guy. You say to XM Bank, before you ship, I'm planning to do 60 days, $100,000 order this party. Will you insure me? XM Bank will then come back and say, we'll check with them. We're going to check on this company. They come back and say, thumbs up, no problem, we'll do it. You've got a good buyer. They come back, I'm sorry, we weren't able to identify this buyer. We're not sure. We're not willing to insure it. Maybe, hey, that's when you want to keep on some kind of cash terms with, or use a letter of credit or some other kind of transaction. So it actually acts as a bit of a credit department, a credit intelligence department for you. So that is the 95% solution. They work through export insurance brokers, a whole network of private sector brokers. You can find them on their website, xm.gov, and you, with that, can then export with confidence, knowing you've got a backstop of export credit insurance. Okay, let's talk about another problem, another mystery that the exporter faces as they're selling internationally. I call this one the case of the shrinking borrowing base. All right, so now in lending, banks frequently are very happy to lend to companies based on collateral, right? Every bank likes collateral. SBA likes collateral when we're guaranteeing loans. Everyone likes collateral. And when you're lending for export orders, oftentimes the collateral is going to be the foreign accounts receivable that are going to be coming in. The payments, a company has been selling internationally, they've started using export insurance perhaps, they've got a bunch of accounts receivable now. So, several dozen of these $100,000 orders are to come in. And the bank, obviously we see businesses commonly sell on terms to domestic companies, so that's part of the borrowing base as well. So the bank will say, all right, well, tell me who you've sold to and how much you've got coming in from all of your client list, and let's figure out a borrowing base. And we'll lend you so much against all those foreign accounts receivable. So the bank looks at at that ledger of all the foreign accounts, or of all the accounts receivable from the company, and says, boy, I notice you're selling more and more to these international buyers. That makes us at the bank a little bit uncomfortable. We're feeling a little bit nervous about that. And so they start tightening up the discount rate of what they'll advance against the accounts receivable that are in the international side of the balance sheet. So here's an example to illustrate. So typical lender, they'll advance something against your inventory, your raw materials, and work in progress and finished goods. Not that much, but they'll advance something. So you can see this company's got about $1 million tied up in stuff that's getting ready to be finished and shipped off. And the darn bank, 20% is all they'll advance against the raw material and 50% against the finished goods. They got $1 million of assets tied up, and they can only borrow $340,000 against it. Then they've got some foreign accounts receivable, and the bank says, on open account to that foreign buyer, we're giving you nothing. If they don't pay, what's that worth? And then yes, you've got some export insurance or a letter of credit. Well, okay, we'll go 70% on that. So this company's got $2 million of assets in action that is deployed in inventory and accounts receivable, and the bank is saying, well, we'll help you with that with a working capital loan of $760,000. Wow, the bank is being very prudent here, but the exporter is feeling a little bit squeezed as he's getting into these international markets. This is where the loan guarantees come in. The second tool that I talked about, and SBA has a particular program which is aptly named as the Export Working Capital Program to help unlock more of that collateral. What we do is we say, banker, what if SBA provided a 90% guarantee for you on your export working capital loan to this company? Then you can extend a more aggressive advance rate on the balance sheet of this exporter, so that instead of looking like it did here with $760,000 available, we'll provide you a 90% guarantee, bank. So if anything goes wrong and you can't collect 90 cents on the dollar, SBA takes care of the bank. You can now advance 75% against that inventory and accounts receivable and work in progress. And you can advance 80% on your uninsured open account and 90% on your insured and letter of credit backed foreign accounts receivable. So now the $2 million that are tied up in this foreign business venture can access $1.6 million of finance from their lender. So it's a great tool to unlock financing for the exporter. We basically more than doubled the working capital line by deploying this 90% guarantee from SBA. Okay, let me talk about another mystery though, the mystery of the missing borrowing base. We were talking about those exporters that frequently ship cash in advance. They don't have that luxury of having dozens of foreign buyers and foreign accounts receivable to put into a borrowing base. They've only shipped cash in advance, so they don't have a bunch of foreign accounts receivable. And now they've got a cool export order that says, wow, I'd like to buy a bunch of your stuff. Can you ship it to me? And the banker says, well, let's look at your, let's develop a borrowing base here. And you say, well, I have no accounts receivable. I always get paid in advance. The banker says, whoa, that's purchase order financing. That's very scary to us. That means, there's no collateral here. It's just like the work in progress is all that's there. Well, there's no way to do an asset-based loan in this situation. But again, the Export Working Capital Program of SBA can come to the rescue, again providing a 90% guarantee for the bank, so they feel like, wow, okay, if everything goes wrong, we can collect 90 cents on the dollar from SBA, and SBA will back foreign purchase orders with a 90% guarantee, so that the bank can advance up to 90% of the purchase order value. So if it's a $1 million purchase order, they can advance up to $900,000 or the actual working capital needs necessary, whichever is less. And the loan is just going to be repaid once that foreign purchase order is paid. So it's actually money to borrow from the bank to get the job done, so that that business, so that product can be delivered, that contract can be fulfilled, and it's outstanding until the purchase order is paid, and it retires the loan. It can be done as multi-transaction, so not just one transaction. So it's pre-shipment financing, something that banks typically are going to be very reluctant to do, but with an export working capital, we can get them over the hump and get that financing there. So here's an example, a very small one, of this was a company that did wood flooring, and they got an order for the Performing Arts Center in South Korea, and this was only their second order. It was a pretty big deal for them. It was a great deal. It was $160,000. They were going to get $15,000 cash in advance, and then the balance was going to be paid upon delivery with a $145,000 letter of credit assuring that would happen. So very easy to do, but the bank was still like, well, something could go wrong. We don't want to do it. With an export working capital loan, just a simple 4-month loan. They were able to get the working capital they needed and produce the order, deliver it. Once they were paid, the loan was retired. So a single transaction. It can be set up as a multi-transaction revolving line of credit to support many of them, but this was just a single transaction rate based pre-shipment financing deal. Okay, third export finance mystery. Again, going back to this issue of prepayments. The case of the prepayment that wasn't. Again, U.S. companies love the cash in advance approach. Great. So they go to the foreign buyer, they say, pay me cash in advance, it's $1 million deal. Okay, great, I will. The foreign buyer says, all right, I will happily pay you cash in advance for this. I'm going to be wiring you the $1 million. But before I do that, I'd like something called a performance bond. Because after all, I'm on the other side of the ocean, I don't know you, I'm not going to come to the U.S. and litigate against you if you don't perform. So I'm sending you this money. I want to know I'm going to get what I'm paying for, and I'm paying in advance. So can you please, kindly provide me with a performance bond? Performance bond. Okay. Well, let me talk to my banker about that. You go to the bank. The bank says, we have just the tool for this. It's a perfect thing. It's designed exactly for this. It's something called a standby letter of credit. What it means is that if you ever don't perform, the foreign buyer can make a demand on our bank, and we will pay the $1 million to them, so that they know there's a bank standing behind your performance. That makes them feel good. That's the performance bond. And we're happy to do that. All you need to do is deposit $1 million in our bank, and we'll hang on to it for the term of the performance bond. And the U.S. company says, oh, shoot. This is screwing me up, because that $1 million, that was my working capital that I was going to use to fulfill this order. I got to go buy the materials. I got to hire the workers, pay, wait for a payment. What am I going to do now? There's my working capital. It's gone. My prepayment is not a prepayment after all. Again, export working capital program can come to the rescue in this kind of situation as well, because in addition to being used as just a line of credit to fulfill those things, it can also be used by the bank to back their standby letter of credit. So the bank will issue that standby letter of credit to the foreign buyer, knowing SBA is standing behind it with a 90% guarantee. And the cool thing about it is we only ask that the bank have collateral equal to 25% of the face amount of the standby letter of credit. So that $1 million standby letter of credit only requires $250,000 of collateral. So deposit that in the bank. The other $750,000 is free to be used for your working capital needs to fulfill that order. So third way the export working capital program can come to the rescue. Holmes is delighted. Watson is astonished. All right, here's case number 5. The case of the competitive exporter. Okay, so U.S. companies getting involved in exporting, they're saying, wow, this is a great international market. I'm finding lots of opportunities here. But jeepers creepers, I am in need of, some added equipment. I need to modernize my facility, real estate improvements, or I'm carrying this very high interest rate over here. It's really impairing my ability to proceed. I'd like to refinance that, get it at a better rate, better rates and terms. The International Trade Loan Program that SBA offers, again, provides the bank a 90% guarantee to come in and provide term financing where the money is injected into the company for whatever the project is, and then it's retired over 10, 15, 20, even 25 years for real estate loans to be repaid. So a term loan to make the exporter more competitive. That's the international trade loan. This is a very unusual case. We hardly ever see this one. The case of the exporter that hated paperwork. Can you imagine? Well, the good news is SBA knows, particularly on small loans, there's not a need for a lot of information. Banks are very adept at processing loans. SBA doesn't need to see much of anything. Certainly if it's a small loan, which small is relative factor, but from bank's perspective, anything under 500,000 is hardly worth their time. So we say, look, we will let you bankers do your thing. If if we've approved you, you're a bank that knows the SBA programs, just do it. We're delegating it to you. Use your own collateral standards. We're going to back you on these deals. Go help those small businesses on these small loans, and you don't have to mess around with worrying about what SBA is thinking. Just do it. This is the Export Express program, and it is basically a hybrid of the two previous programs I described. It can be for real estate, equipment, debt refinancing, like the international trade loan, or it can be like a working capital line of credit for all of those needs that we discussed in our three mysterious examples. And then one final mystery here for you. This is, how do I find the foreign buyer? Well, you know Shannon already. So Department of Commerce, these guys are brilliant at finding those foreign buyers for you. But you still want to meet them. You still want to get over there and go to the foreign trade show, get in front of them and talk to them, see them eye to eye, and see is it really someone you want to do business with. Going to foreign trade shows is an expensive proposition. Of course, we've heard a lot about the strong US dollar, which makes it harder to sell internationally in the sense that it makes our products more expensive. But it also makes traveling internationally a lot cheaper, and this is a great time to do marketing internationally. Everybody qualifies for that program, but still costs money. SBA has a program called the STEP Grant Program, which it's a grant that we deliver to state governments. In California, we just made a $740,000 grant to the California Community College Network Centers for International Trade Development, and these guys now have that $740,000 plus more matching money from the state of California, so about $1 million to help U.S. companies go to foreign trade shows and defer part of their costs in doing that. Basically about $2,500 per exporter that goes. You have to apply for it, and if you qualify, they will reimburse you after you come back and provide the receipts that you really did what you said you did. And they're also setting up a number of trade show opportunities based on what they see as high value proposition for California companies. So if you're interested in that, californiastep.org is the website. You can go on there, apply for that, and get qualified, and use this as an added incentive to get over into those international markets. So those are some thoughts on export financing. There's my contact information. I'm in San Francisco, happy to come down and work with any of you. I work primarily with bankers, so if you're looking for banks that are familiar with international finance, that have strong international connections, know about these programs, I can be a good resource for you. Frequently, banks are large institutions, just like the federal government, and they may not know within their own bank who are the people familiar with these programs. These are kind of specialized programs that I've talked about, and so not everybody in every bank knows about them. I can be a resource for you within your own bank. Where do we find somebody that can help you with these issues?